All right, so again, welcome back to another Xamarin University guest lecture. Today we're going to be talking with Mike Bluestein. He's going to talk to us about Couchbase Mobile and how we can integrate the Couchbase framework into our Xamarin apps and what it can do for us, the ways we can use it to improve our apps and improve the server connectivity and data access with Couchbase. So for those who don't know, let me go ahead and just introduce Mike. Mike is one of the very first users of Xamarin.iOS, dating all the way back to the pre-Xamarin days, back when it was called MonoTouch instead of Xamarin, back when Xamarin was owned by Novell. So he's been around for a very long time. He was also an early Xamarin employee, one of the very first, where he was the documentation lead and a developer evangelist for Xamarin as well. So if you like and use Xamarin's wonderful docs to help you figure things out, you can partially thank Mike. Many of the conceptual articles and the samples in the Xamarin Developer Center were initially created by him. He also authored a book called Learning MonoTouch, which is a hands-on guide to building better iOS applications with C# and .NET. Go check out Amazon. You'll find that there. Buy that. You're going to learn some great stuff. That's from Addison Wesley, and it's been published internationally in multiple languages as well. So check that out. He's also created a MonoTouch course for the App Dev website. Another thing to check out. Lots of great material from Mike. And today he works as a software architect for Think Ahead Software, where he leads their mobile consulting practice. And like I said, we're going to now learn about Couchbase. So as we go through the guest lecture, feel free to add questions into the GoToWebinar question panel. Mike will try to answer those at the end of the presentation, so you might have to wait a little while, but put them in any time, and we'll go through them as we get time at the end. We also might have a little bit of time at the end of the class to address any other questions that might come up as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Mike take over. Go ahead, Mike.
All right, great. Thank you, Rob. Thanks for the nice introduction. I did a lot of work at Xamarin, almost a lot of my time there was working on the docs, so had a great team there as well, of course, that works on docs. And if you're finding bugs in there from early on things, I'll take the opportunity to say I'm sorry. Hopefully most of your experience has been good with it. It's a really good doc site. They work hard on it. They made it a lot better. So what I'm pleased to be able to talk to you about this morning is a technology called Couchbase and Couchbase Mobile, more specifically, and how it works, of course, with Xamarin, how that fits in with Xamarin, what are the benefits of using it with Xamarin, which are significant. And good morning to everyone. So morning where I am on the east coast of the U.S. If you're out on the west coast, it's real early, so I've tried to help you out with this nice bright yellow slide. If it's burning your eyes, we'll get off of that there. Let's talk about what is Couchbase Mobile. Well, Couchbase Mobile is three things, really, three larger topics and technologies that Couchbase offers. We have Couchbase Lite, which is a local in-memory Couchbase embedded database. Actually, it sits on top of other technologies locally, like SQLite specifically, and the different file systems. But that's an implementation detail. You're abstracted from all of that, which is quite nice with Couchbase Lite. And you could use Couchbase Lite without anything else. Just use it locally, like as a local storage technology. And we'll talk more about that. Another part of Couchbase Mobile is something they call the sync gateway. And what this is this is a middle tier, middleware server technology that your Couchbase Lite clients can use to then aggregate out or talk to the full-blown Couchbase server, which is their main product, their NoSQL database, distributed document-based database. That's what they have. So the three things together all make up what they would term Couchbase Mobile. Of course, Couchbase Server in and of itself has nothing specifically to do with mobile, and it's used in a lot, the majority of cases outside of that. And Couchbase Lite can be used completely independent of Couchbase Server, and then there's this sync gateway thing that sits in the middle of them that allows Couchbase Lite and iPhone, Android, Windows Phone, whatever clients to communicate up to Couchbase servers as things connected. So it runs itself nicely to offline and disconnected scenarios, and then syncing it or replicating as you will. So what we're going to focus on in the talk today is in the server piece. That's a big, enormous topic in and of itself. And what we're going to focus on is the part that really is specific to the mobile side, Couchbase Lite, which is really all of it. You can almost call the talk Couchbase Lite. And then the sync gateway that kind of lives to service Couchbase Lite and its communication with Couchbase Server and subsequently other clients to sync data. What I'll do is I'm going to go through a slideshow here, so talk about the higher level points of the API. We'll kind of walk through the finer details of the API. And then at the end, I have a little demo that I put together in Xamarin.iOS and Android with some shared code that I can show you how to get started going with a simple little example, but it's kind of neat with Couchbase Lite and Couchbase the sync gateway as well. So what is Couchbase Lite? Talked a little bit about it already, but what it is it's an embedded NoSQL database. That's what it is. And it allows, as I discussed, syncing with Couchbase Server via the sync gateway. That's what Couchbase Lite is, and it can be used completely independent of the syncing part, although the syncing part's sort of the big thing you're going to get, right? Otherwise, it becomes just a different API upon which you're dealing with local storage. However, a quite nice one that could be used with Xamarin cross-platform. But that's what it is. Couchbase Lite, it's an embedded NoSQL database, but that's giving you a beautiful local offline API, abstracting all the details of storing data in a NoSQL, meaning document-driven kind of way. So what's that really mean? It gives you offline access, right? Implicitly or explicitly. That's all you could just use it that way. So just use it like a SQLite database, only not touching SQLite directly, using it through their API, which is pretty neat. It gives you indexing via MapReduce or reviews. So what that's doing for you, this is how they create queries on top of everything. So you have all these documents that you're storing, and then they have a way in their API to index all those documents, and they use MapReduce. I'm just going to assume most folks out here are familiar with what MapReduce is. If you're not, I'll just take 2 seconds. It's already available. They just use in .NET as well, has been for some time. If you use LINQ, Microsoft, for whatever reason, made the terminology different in LINQ. Map is like select, basically, and if you're familiar with aggregate, that's your reduce. So they use that as a way, very, very common, well understood approach to index over the data and then subsequently giving you an opportunity to aggregate or reduce the data, do things like filtering before it would admit it out into an index that you could then query. Okay, and you have a nice API to do that. And then the third and really maybe the biggest thing, even though, again, it's pretty neat to even use without the server part because it's a pretty nice API, but they give you this syncing with Couchbase servers via the sync gateway. It's kind of their sweet sauce, right? There's a lot of things in the industry now that do this kind of offline and syncing. I know Azure's got their kind of new thing, and there's other people that have this, but what's nice with this is you're using full-blown Couchbase servers for the people that would want to have a server installation with Couchbase, which offers a lot of benefits, really great performance, not the least of which, and pretty clean way to do security, and also has a very nice API on top of it. So you can make your choices over whether it's something for you. All right. So in the .NET world, and take a step back from that, Couchbase is actually available in a lot of different flavors. We're here in Xamarin, talking in Xamarin today, and I think I'm kind of biased, of course, right? That I think Xamarin sort of is the best solution for doing mobile development. However, obviously, a lot of people still use Objective-C. A lot of people, majority of people in Android using Java, and then there's other people that use other things. So these guys have different implementations of Couchbase, and they all work through with a nice REST API underneath, right, with Couchbase Lite. Downside of all that is you have to write like anything else with these, going direct to the native languages, call it. You have to write everything multiple times. So this is a perfect technology to use with Xamarin. It really goes together well with it because you get all those same APIs, but you get them from one set of code. It's just screaming use Xamarin because it's a shame to have to write what amounts to the exact same code multiple times. Sometimes that can have some benefit to doing things multiple times if you really want a native API because the platform vendor like Apple or Google gives you something that maybe .NET didn't have. Of course, Xamarin allows those too. But in this case, it's just you absolutely have great benefit. The code sharing benefit is just obvious. It works great from what I've seen so far. Right? It's distributed via NuGet, so it's really easy. Everyone knows how to use NuGet. You can just get it through there. It's also available in the component store. So if you want to take that, the Xamarin Component Store, you want to take that route, you could go at it that way. Okay, and you could use it in PCL, you could use it in a shared project. And the sample I'm going to show you today, I did it in a shared project. I find those easier in a lot of cases, but whatever suits you. Okay. Couchbase Lite, then how does it work together with Xamarin? What's the benefit? Well, I talked about it already, and the benefit is the obvious thing, right? I get the cross-platform shared code. It's almost as if it was. You'll start to use it and you'll feel like it was developed by Xamarin in some ways because the API, they made their binding pretty idiomatic. I feel like they did an all in all pretty good job on the binding. However, underneath the covers, there's a REST API, and it's not really, there's not .NET specific things going on underneath, but they expose it in a really nice way to .NET. The big benefit, though, is when you put it together with Xamarin, you get the shared code. Like most things with Xamarin, that's a benefit. Obviously, you get a benefit in the language, too. These days, people seem to have more of an affinity towards the shared code as the benefit of Xamarin, although I still, to this day, find it the best language I've used. But whatever. Couchbase Lite, then let's talk about the API. Right? So we'll get into Couchbase, the other part of Couchbase Mobile. We're going to discuss syncing in a little bit. But first, let's talk about the API and really everything that you need to work with, just the Couchbase locally, to use it just as a local data store. The key to the kingdom, so to speak, the key to using the thing, is what they have a class called a manager class. And it's really easy to use. All of their API is easy to use, in my opinion. But to get started, you just have to have access to this manager class, which gets you entry point into the Couchbase Lite's embedded database, which again, implementation detail, we're actually using SQLite in parts underneath. They actually use the file system too in parts and some of their own things, but it's pretty interesting. So to get at it, you just go through a property on the class manager shared instance, which gives you a single thing. So just manager shared instance, that gets you the manager class. And that's what the code looks like. And the things you would do with the manager class is something like give me an instance of the database. Right? So the database I'm going to use here, I just have a sample line of code called my database. Just going to give it some name. We'll see this in the sample. So it's kind of one line of code to get a hook, get a reference to the database and then do things with it. So what's this database though? What's that about? Is it a SQL? I mentioned SQLite. That's again an implementation detail. What it is, it's just this embedded. You want to think of it when going through Couchbase Lite as not something that you're writing. You're not going to write SQL directly. You're going to use their MapReduce style. You're doing queries in Couchbase Lite, and you're going to access the thing through in a way that you're just going through, treating it as if the SQLite is just something that's under the covers, because it's an implementation that they could change. Now, so this database is encapsulating everything, basically. That's saying it in a long way, but it's an abstraction around the whole entry into the database. And therefore, you can do things, right? You can access the database through their APIs, to do your CRUD type of things. Okay? So the first thing you're going to work with, though, and the thing, once you've got the manager and you use that to get the database, is you're going to be working with documents. So it's a NoSQL database. So even though it's using, again, this, it's got this other thing underneath the covers there locally, not what they have on the server, but locally, you're just going through their abstraction. So you get these things called documents. So I'm not going to query a table or anything like that. It is a document-based API, and you're going to do things in a NoSQL way, meaning you're going to have dictionaries of data. And those dictionaries of data are just what you're going to save in a document, right? Key value type of way. And along with that, you can have files that go with it. So these the document class in Couchbase Lite is what represents the Couchbase Lite document, right? And it's the document class that you're going to use to save data into Couchbase Lite. And subsequently later, you'll see how to sync that data up through the sync gateway to Couchbase servers, and then come back down through the sync gateway to other Couchbase Lite clients on whatever platform it may be. This document then, as I said, it allows you saving and retrieving data via a dictionary. When you're coming at it, it's specific to the .NET implementation. If you want to look at other languages and their implementations, they go idiomatic there. Obviously, they have the classes like hash map, other things, but you'll see it through a dictionary. It should be real familiar, easier to use to people. So I just I have this database, I have this manager class. I use the manager to get to the Couchbase Lite database. Gives me this embedded Couchbase Lite NoSQL document database through their API, and then I operate on the thing via documents, right? Or I interact with the thing via documents, right? It's kind of my unit of data. Right? Make sense? Now, once I have, great, I've got this database, I've got documents, I want to save the documents, I want to retrieve them. What kind of, how do I do that? Well, basic CRUD operations available through their API that hang off the database class. So you have to create a document, it's real simple. You just call DB, that would be the database class that you get through the manager. And I can just create a document through the create document method. Similarly, if I want to read a document, that document's going to give you back an identifier that Couchbase Lite, that comes from the API. I can get a document just by calling get document. If I want to update a document, it's a little trickier because there's a couple ways. So I can call on the document class now because I'm actually operating on a document that I have. I call put properties and give it this, props there is just that dictionary. So just a bunch of key values. Or I can call update. And it takes it in the .NET API, it takes a thing called an update delegate. The difference being, they'll both update the document and then persist it, right? So if you want to just make changes. The difference being, put properties will do it and it won't do anything for you as far as conflicts. If you're using the thing just locally and you're not getting into, going through a sync gateway and multiple people operating in the data, it's not going to make too much of a difference. It depends on what you're doing in your app, I guess. But with put properties, you're going to have to roll whatever you're going to be doing for conflict resolution yourself. All right. With update, they try to do it a little nicer. What they do is they create, you called update on the document, and you take this, you can do it through an action, through a LAM expression. They'll pass through a revision of the document, and on that revision instance, you can apply your updates to the document in there. Then if there's any kind of conflict with somebody else that was doing something, or somebody else or yourself in your own app, that delegate, that action will get called recursively, and it'll just keep getting called again and again until you've resolved all the conflicts. And then you write your resolve logic in there, your conflict resolution logic in there. You'll see in my sample, though, I didn't do that. So it's one of the things I've had on my list in this sample I made to implement it properly under update. But I at least have the calling pattern there, so you can see that. So that's kind of the difference. Put properties, the usage of the thing typically in a real app would be, hey, I'm creating the document the first time, and I just want to put this new document, put some properties into it. There's no conflict, it's a new document. The update is the one where you're dealing with a true update, and you're changing things to something that already existed. Again, if you're just local, though, and you're going to use it in that mechanism, it's not going to, I feel like it's not going to make too much of a difference to you, but in a distributed kind of way where you're really using it with syncing, the update one's the one you want to go with, and then I'll need to expand upon the example. I'm going to show you some more to demonstrate how to actually do that, because it still gets a little involved, but at least you have the recursive calling pattern done for you. So that's nice. Okay, so that's the first three things, and then the last thing is delete, and delete's trivial, right? Just called document delete. So to get at documents, you have the two APIs off of the database class, create document, get document, and to interact with the documents that already exist, save stuff into it, you have three methods you can deal with, two ways to deal with updating and pushing data into the document, and then delete, the trivial call to just delete it. Okay, and we're going to see this. I've got all of these implemented in a simple way. It's pretty much. It's very much a demoware app, but it does show in a simple way a kind of neat example in exercising all of this API, as well as using it through the sync gateway. The other thing now that you get, so that's all nice, right? I mean, that gives you a nice high level around saving data. Of course, you could use ORA, you could use like a SQLite net or a variety of different things or you can go right at SQL itself if you wanted to do it that way, going straight to SQL C API through pinvoke, or you could, I don't know why you would do that, but you could, or you could use the ADO.NET provider, all the options you'd have in the .NET world with Xamarin. Now, if you wanted to save files, though, along with that, although, steps before you can get in files, it's still pretty nice to have the document-driven way to do it, I think. If you're depending on how your data is, if it really isn't relational, and you're saving data that's not in just a bunch of tables that are loose anyway, which you sometimes see people doing, kind of not what you would do if you're using a relational database on a server, but sometimes people just want to save some data and they don't have a lot of relational needs. It's just kind of transient maybe in some ways. So depending on what you're doing in your application, this API could really lend itself to you over going through one of the SQL Lite type of APIs, right, ORM or otherwise. So aside from that, though, that's a smaller thing. A bigger thing in their local API through Couchbase Lite are these attachments. Now, so if you're doing it in another way, right, and forgetting about the syncing or anything, and you just wanted to save files. Say I was making an app, and the app has a bunch of metadata about photos, for example. And now I'm also going to save the photo. And I know there's EXIF data and all, but I might want to have some other data that goes with it that's not going to be embedded in the photo that I just want to save. And I might just say, oh, I'm saving some data that's metadata. I'll put it in I'll put it in SQLite. Work fine. And then I'll have some kind of an indicator to tell me, something in the database that says what's the file that goes with it. A file name. I'll come up with some convention. People do these things in servers too, right? So then they have some file server or an array of file servers. And then the relational database just has information about where the files are living. Then you have to write some kind of code to keep it all in sync. And when the file's deleted, delete the record in the database and so on. And you'd have to do that if you were doing it even locally. And you'd have to deal with the different file I/O APIs going across the different platforms like Android, iOS, Windows, for example. Xamarin abstracts some of that for you, quite a bit of it actually, so they make that a lot easier. So that's good. But there's still the differences on where certain things actually get located, the actual addresses of the folders, and people deal with that by doing things like they'll provide some interface just to deal with the platform-specific part, or maybe do it through through dependency injection, an IOC kind of thing, and let that take care of the platform-specific part. Which in SQLite, for example, you'll see that in how people will create the database, and they'll have some provider or something that'll create or do dependency injection to create the location of the database in the platform-specific code, and then the rest of their data access layer goes in shared code, and they're happy, and everything's great. So anyways, there's still going to be some differences with file I/O, and even if they're on the platforms, and even if where there aren't, you'd have to roll it all yourself. So what attachments do, obviously, they encapsulate binary data. But the bigger point I'm going to try to make here is the attachment data that you work with Couchbase Lite is handled by Couchbase Lite. So you don't, that whole discussion I just gave in preface to this slide, you don't have to deal with any of that. You have this document, and the document has a revision that you could save an attachment to. And Couchbase Lite takes care of reconciling that. I have the document with an ID and whatever metadata you want about the document, person's name, who saved it, the picture scenario. Might take all the EXIF data right out of the document, put it in out of the image itself, and put it in there, whatever it may be. Right? If it's a song, maybe you might have the information you want to put about who where, whatever, where's the last, where did they leave off playing it to pause so you can resume it later. Might be a nice convenience to have that. Things like that. So that all's in the document, but the file itself it behaves to you as a developer. You'll be able to get at the attachment just like it's another thing in the, it's a little bit of a different API, but you'll be able to get at it just like it's another piece of data that's in the document, because it really is, right? So it's associated with the document by Couchbase Lite. It's queryable with Couchbase Lite, so it's retrievable, maybe, rather. It's storable via Couchbase Lite. So you totally abstracted, pure cross-platform code. And they're smart about it, too. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, but it's represented with MIME types. So it's very much, the attachment's the right word. It's a lot like dealing with putting an attachment in an email if you're doing it through an email like that. So it's going to be real familiar with how you create and say what these things are. And the API is real simple. And then they have this storage algorithm they have. And it's really clever. Because remember now, these things, you could be going through syncing, and you could be saving multiple things, and things could be being pushed by other clients and then coming down potentially. But even if not, you could be saving multiple things locally. Well, what they do is, say you had say I had a file and I had another version of copy of that file, even if I gave it a different name. They're smart. What they do is they hash the content. They create a hash of the content of the file, and then if you go to save another version of the file, say like file copy 2, but it's the exact same file, what they'll do is they'll hash it, and they won't actually save it again. They'll actually recognize that, oh, this guy is the file that this attachment that's already been saved, so that they'll be really lean about not duplicating the storage, and you get that out of it. You don't have to do anything to get that. So that happens for free. So it's really smart with storage of things. It's really efficient from what I've seen about retrieving the I/O that it does, and it's a pretty nice API. So this attachments thing is a big win in using it even in the local world, even without the syncing part that we're going to get into. Right? So now you have these documents, you have the database, you have the documents, and optionally you can have attachments that go along with the documents in the side part of it, which are kind of cool. Now, how do I get at the data? I get at the data, as you imagine, through a query. The query is a little different in the Couchbase Lite and on the local thing. They have this thing called Nickel, which is this kind of DSO where you can query things that's SQL-like up on the server. And I think that's, if it hasn't come yet, it's going to be coming in the local thing. I'm not certain of that. But the classic way to do it, and the way I've done it, is taking their query approach that works with MapReduce that I mentioned earlier. It's 3 steps to creating a query. You create a view. Right? That's kind of your index of your documents. You create the query from the view. That's the purpose of the view, is to create a query from it. And then the last thing is you run the query. And when you run the query, you get a thing called a query enumerator back that you can enumerate through all the results. Right? Pretty simple. So what a view is it's an index of documents, as I just mentioned. They create this index using MapReduce, as I explained earlier as well. And again, for people who maybe aren't familiar out there, just like similar to a select aggregate type of thing. And here's a little example of creating the view. You just, on the database object, you call getView. Once you have that view, what you want to call it, this is the MapReduce. You set map, right? This part of it is not quite as idiomatic on the API call, but you call set map. In that, you can provide a closure, a lambda expression, where it passes through the document that you set in the map on for every document in the store, right? And you get this emit function, and then the emit function is where you could run whatever you want in there, so you can do things. You get an opportunity to do things like say, hey, I want to filter what's going to be emitted into my index, or I could just emit everything into the index, right? So this is how you create an index on the thing through MapReduce that you can then subsequently query. Okay, pretty straightforward. You query it through an API on the view, right? So again, we have this view. View's purpose in life is to do the MapReduce thing so that I can create the index. And then I use a query to query on that view. You can do it asynchronously, so nice async await support if you want that in the .NET version. And then you get back a query enumerator, as I just mentioned. Here's an example of creating a query. Right? Very simple API. Once I had that view that I created in the previous slide, I just go create query from it. And then once I have that query, I can run it or run it async, and I get a query enumerator back. Okay, pretty simple to do. I will mention there's also a convenience I'll show you that I use in that's really only appropriate for development, but it's great for getting started. They have this one query that's out of the box. You don't have to do any of that, and you can just get all documents. And if you had a really big database, that wouldn't be the greatest thing to do. But it's really awesome for doing a quick test, or you want to prototype an app, or you're just getting started. They have a lot of little things to help you with just getting started in their API, so they make it really easy to onboard, as long as you know that some of those things might not be things you want to use, like the get all documents query in production. I'll show it to you in my sample I'm going to have. So that's kind of the local part of the story, right? You've got this manager class to get you to the database. You get this database that I'm mentioning to you that provides an abstraction around what happens to be SQLite, but you never see that. And they could change that. They may be changing it. I'm not even sure. They just came up with a new version. And the database allows you to do the normal CRUD type of stuff. Right? You deal with documents as your unit of data interaction, and attachments that can go on the side if you want to have files that go with them, all associated together. You create views to provide an index around your document database, right? Your NoSQL database from an API perspective locally. Those indices, those views, you can create queries from, and they can be queried asynchronously. Okay, with some convenience ones that come free out of the box. With a very simple API. So that's where we are, and that's all local. All this talking I'm doing is all local, what we're talking about. Yeah. And you could use that for free, right? Cross-platform, right out of the box. That's kind of sweet. Now, later, or at the same time or whenever, you can come along and say, hey, I want to now take this database and I want to sync it to another client. It could be sync it to a different user. You could be syncing it to another person has the app on Android, they have the app on iOS, various Windows platforms, whatever. So this is where it's pretty nice because now nothing locally has to change. All your implementation stays the same, and everything just you don't get it for free. You got to do some work, but all the syncing kind of gets layered on top of it. And so this Couchbase Lite part, this, of course, is designed to work with their syncing technology. And also, even if you just wanted to make it so that I can work offline and then have things sync later, to have the online offline type of scenario that people have, because you are distributing data across even one user that's using the client in multiple places. That syncing doesn't necessarily have to be across multiple users. It could just be multiple clients for the same user. Maybe that's even the more often case, perhaps. Right? So they have this syncing technology, and it's provided through another server type of thing they have called their sync gateway, which you can run on Linux and you can run on Windows. That's another nice thing they have too, is everything with server-wise you can run on different OSs, right? And I have in my example, I'll show you the thing running on Linux, and then I went and I put a whole Couchbase installation on Azure and did that on Windows. And I'll get them the example afterwards, or I'll post it, and you can have everything provided. Pretty seamless though, really simple to set up. Just to get going, the work there on the server would be like when you start trying to get into like, well, how am I going to secure this thing and put it into production? There'd be a lot more server work, but to do it from getting it all together for the mobile app side of things is straightforward. Right. So they have this thing called the sync gateway, and the sync gateway, it's your replication server, and it goes between Couchbase Lite and the server, as I mentioned, the true Couchbase server installation, and then back to the sync gateway and any clients that are hanging off, that'll then connect to that. So it gives you a nice, kind of, intermediate point to sync information, right? And you can then there's a function you have where you can provide additional who's allowed to do things, authorization, authentication, throttling code, calls, different stuff. Right? You don't have to do any of that. So it's pretty straightforward to get going with, pretty easy, and I'll show you that. Along with the sync gateway, before I go and pull replication, I'll just mention, if you didn't have a server, if you just wanted to do it in development, and I said, hey, I want to try the syncing part out and develop my client with the syncing part and bring in the the Couchbase server later, they have an in-memory database that comes for developers to use, and that's what I'm going to show you demoed here today. Sometimes it's a little tricky. You have to restart it. So hopefully by sitting here talking, it didn't get into that kind of state. Usually if it's a developer, it is designed for development though, so that wouldn't be a problem. Hopefully it'll still work when we do it. So it gives you push and pull replication. And as I mentioned just now, I got ahead of myself. There's an in-memory server. It's called Walrus for development. In-memory Couchbase server. Okay. Now, it's just the API. It's real simple. You just create a replication object you call start on whether a push or a pull replication. Right? Now, one other thing, I'm just going to mention this in a slide. It's a kind of a neat thing. I'm not going to have time to show it today, but I might make a blog post at some point later. They have this thing called live query. And what that says is, so you had imagine you're doing a stock app or a chat client, something where you want, I want the data to be pushed down to the client, and it's quasi or near real time kind of thing. It's not true real time, but I want the client to listen. And I don't want to poll, and I didn't necessarily want to have to do events. They have this thing called a live query where changes that come in from the server, it can observe those changes, and then it has a point that it could listen for it. It's really designed as a reactive API, if folks are familiar with that, where you can have an observable and an observer and do it in that manner. However, they also have in the .NET version a classic event binding, so you can do it either way, right? So they have a changed event. So it's like, kind of the way that most .NET developers would understand. So I did it in the slide here. You can take any query, create it into a live query, and now subsequently I have this query that can listen for changes on the query. So it's like, hey, find me, all the stocks that are greater than, a certain time, or when the price changes, or whatever you wanted to do in your query. And this is just going to get, for the most part, notified. Right? You can do it the event-based way in .NET, or you can do it in a reactive kind of way too. I've got an example with the reactive way. I just haven't finished it. So keep an eye out. I'll get a link to my blog if people want to watch that. I'll be blogging. The next couple of things I'm going to finally get around to have some time to blog about will be about Couchbase. So hopefully we'll have some nice follow-up stuff. I wanted to have it today, but didn't quite have time. So there's that live query though. So that's one thing. Another thing, kind of coming soon, is this peer-to-peer API. Now this has been around a little while, not a long time, with Couchbase Lite and their other implementations, and they just over the summer here, I think it was July, but recently they've brought it to the .NET version, and what it is that syncing part is great, but this doesn't require that syncing part. What this allows you to do is a true peer-to-peer. You can use Bonjour, if folks are familiar with that, it's just zero-conf to resolve where things are on the network, and then it'll take care of basically syncing peer-to-peer. they have an example that they made in other languages, Couchbase being they, and they did some photo sharing. You could do the same thing with .NET and have shared code. So I'm going to make an example of this too. So a couple things I've got coming up will be the next couple things I'm promising here today on my blog. I should have some time here in the next month. And you could, if you don't want to use Bonjour, sometimes Bonjour can be a little flaky. You could use QR code scanning, so you can just detect. You'll see how like maybe some like the way Apple did it with their new watch. They pair things by doing a QR code, and you can resolve it that way and put the information about where the thing is on the network in the QR code itself. Right? And this allows you to do peer-to-peer. Then you could do stuff like devices if you wanted to use some kind of. You could run this on like a Raspberry Pi or something like that, and you can network peer-to-peer with that. And folks have done that in other implementations. So I'm going to cook up something here where I do peer-to-peer and post that as well, along with the live query. Maybe I'll even put them both together. I haven't done the peer-to-peer part yet, though. So a couple things that are coming. So that's kind of a couple extra things. What I want to do now is I'm going to take a second. It's a lot of talking. I know it's hard to like grok. I just got you all the terms out there together, and you saw kind of the overall story. There's all that local thing, and then there's this syncing thing they introduce over and above it, and there's a couple other things, this peer-to-peer and live query that I'm not going to get into. But what I'm going to do now is I've got this little example I made, and hopefully it'll work, that just talks up to a sync gateway, where I'll show it to you, then we'll post this afterwards. There's a couple things I want to try to clean up on it, but cleaned it up a little here today. So here's let me run it. So it's been sitting there. I ran it before. Now again, this goes to that Walrus one, so hopefully it won't fall over by the Walrus server sitting, that development server sitting there for too long. I'm not sure that's it, but we'll see. Let's see. So I've got this thing here. Hopefully this will work. We'll do hello ZMU. Not create that. I'll just write test. I'll let it mock up. Zam. Kind of a image there. Yep. And I'll save it. Great. So you see there, I don't know if it's too small for folks to see, but we have a hello ZMU on the left, excuse me, and on the right you see a little bit uglier. I need to make the Android client look as nice. But you see it updated hello ZMU, and now if I go into the Android client, you can see it moved the data over, the metadata, and this is just an image that I generate after I do the drawing there, right? And then I can come in here, I could delete it, and you see it deletes from the other side. So what it's doing here is, it's saving, it's using Couchbase Lite, and it's using Couchbase Lite to save all this data here, to save, call it metadata, non-file data, and to save an image that I generate with that drawing thing. That's just a little OpenGL example. It's a modified version of the thing we had a while ago in the Xamarin.iOS samples. It's actually from the Monotouch samples days. I just updated it a little bit. A little detail. I don't have it on the Android side. I'm going to try to do that too. So I create the image and I create the data and then I save it. I can make a change though to the. Okay, so no, I won't do it. But I could make a change to the data on the Android side and it would update. I just have no way to generate the image on the Android side right now, just because I haven't implemented it. So it syncs both the data and the attachment, everything together with the document, right? And it does it through that sync gateway. Okay, so I'm not peer-to-peer in this case. I haven't done that. It'd be an interesting that maybe that's what I'll do with the peer-to-peer at first, and I'll just make a peer-to-peer version of this one. So let's see how you do this, right? Go back over to the code here. Try to zoom in a little bit. Make this bigger as much as I can. We don't need the solution pad anyway. I'm just going to show you the shared code here today. I know everybody's already getting a lot of expertise here in Xamarin by being in the university, so I'm not even going to go into Xamarin unless somebody wants me to talk about it. I'll just tell you the project. I've got this iOS project, I've got an Android project, and I've got a shared project. Okay? Pretty classic thing. No big design or anything around it that you'd want to do. Just a quick example. The only shared code I have is just this thing I called this little helper class, which is where all the Couchbase Lite code is in this example. So it's just in this one class here, and the other class I have is just the model, no view model or anything like that in the sample here. It's just too simple. Okay, so by all means though, please do it that way when you building your apps. I'm sure you're learning all about that. In any event though, so here's this Notes Manager class. Let's go through the API that we've talked about in slides, and you can see what it is. I called it Notes Manager. You saw mockups. When I originally did it, I was making it a Notes app, and I just changed the term to mockups just because I don't know, seems like a little more interesting. But all I'm doing is I'm saving some text and saving an image along with it. So the first thing I'm doing here is, we saw the manager class. I said in the slides earlier, you have to use the manager class, which is a singleton implemented through Couchbase Lite's API, which you get at through shared instance, to get an instance of the database. Or it'll take care of creating one if it doesn't exist. So, and if it does exist, it'll just give you a reference to it. So you have to write that one line of code, right? And give it a name that you want. Okay, totally a local thing. And it creates this database here, which is just the Couchbase Lite database object. And oh, by the way, I've referenced it here in this case down here through the Nuget. See, I can learn pronunciation. So you could also do it to a component too. I think the component now with Couchbase is actually just one of those ones that wraps up the NuGet package too. So not certain of that, but either way, however you want to do it. And I could do a PCL here too if I wanted. It doesn't have to be a shared project, just so that you know. So I've got the database. What do I do with the database? Well, I want to get documents, right? I want to create documents. I want to update documents. I want to delete documents. And then this is the API. We're going to see in these few methods to do that. See if I can highlight it here. Good. So I've got this thing called getNote. Note's just the object that I'm wrapping up what is going to be in the Couchbase Lite document. The API there on line 21, you can see, is getDocument. And I'm just getting a document by the particular ID. Right? I'll show you save in a little bit. I'm just doing it in the order. It's not necessarily the order of operations. I'll just do it in the order of the file. It'll be easier to follow. So this is how I get a document that's in my little wrapper here. Just calling db getDocument. And I want to get the properties out of the document. They have on the document itself, they give you back a dictionary. Okay? So the dictionary gets me back all the properties, and then I can turn around and I can put that into whatever I'm doing in my design. If I had a view model, I might populate up the view model and do whatever you want to do. Here I just have a little model and I populate my model, which is just a note. That's just my implementation. Important part being that I'm getting the document through getDocument, and I get the document's data through user properties. That's the Couchbase Lite part. If I wanted to, that's getting one document, one known document. So that's, selecting it in the table, right? Selecting it and then going to the details screen because I already know the ID of it. Now, get notes is like getting them all. This is where I'm going to run a query. Now, remember we said that we create a query by creating a view, doing MapReduce to do set map, emit the index into the view, and then creating query from the view. That's what you want to do when you're creating queries granularly. But they have this nice little helper, and I just want you to be aware of it. It's convenient, and I used it here. Was that create all documents query? And that's already done for you. Again, this is really a development type of thing. It's just going to give me, but in some cases, maybe this will be all right. Locally, you're on the local machine, just on one mobile app. It's up to you to decide whether it's production type of thing or not. In general, you're probably not going to have a production use for this, but no, there's no law against that, right? You could just be careful of it if it's returning too much data. But that's going to query everything, and it's just a query like everything else, right? Using var, so you can't see. It's just sorry if it's a little small, but the class that returns is actually the query class, right? A Couchbase Lite view query is what that is. To run the query, again, there's async too, so you could have done async, run async. But I'm going to just run the thing here, and I get back this query enumerator, right? Which is what my results are. That's how enumerable, and I can just, this is really kind of old school way. You could use link, you could do whatever you want. You could async and then use link, and then you'd be a modern and fancy. So I'm old and not fancy, so I'm just going to enumerate them here. But that said, I'm joking. You probably would want to do this async because I'm in a block, and that wouldn't be so good. So then I want to be able to have an UI responsive. So do as I say, not as I do. In any event, though, does the same thing, gives you the results back, and then you can just enumerate them, right? You can just enumerate them and take out all the properties on the document. Gives you back this thing that you can get at the document, and you can get the details of the document via user properties, and likewise populate however you're designing your app. In my case, just this note model, right? To save, again, pretty easy. I'm just going to call create document because I'm creating a new document. If I need to create it, I'm doing it in my check here. I just did a simple thing. If my object has no node, I know I'm doing a create new. That's the plus button that I clicked in the UI. So when I created a new one, I said new node, passed that through the ID will be no, and that's how I'm doing it. But the Couchbase Lite part is db create document, right? db create document gives me a document that I can then put properties on to save. The properties I'm going to put on are that dictionary, right? So I know it's new, so that's the case where it makes sense to call put properties. Right? That's all you have to do to save it. Right? You just do those two things. To update, though, existing document, here's just to show you the other API. I could do put properties too, but this is that business of I'm going to do get document now with an ID to get an instance of the document from Couchbase Lite. What I'm going to call update, and I'm going to call update, and in this case, I do it with that update delegate that they have in the .NET version, and the update delegate will get called with a revision of the document that you can subsequently put your new data into a dictionary in the dictionary of the revision, which you get at through properties here, and then return it. Now, that's not good, right? That's just to keep it simple and show you. If I had multiple users updating the thing, I could have conflicts, just like any other thing where multiple things are updating data at the same time. And if I add that, what this is going to do is this thing, if I return false, this thing, if there's a conflict, it'll keep getting called recursively. And then I could put update logic in there to handle conflict resolution, like, well, now you're updating on this revision, but there's another revision of the doc that's newer that already was saved that's synced down in through the sync gateway, so therefore you're going to want to check your revision against, if there is a newer revision, they actually have a call that you can handle that, like, was there a newer revision, and say who wins, how do you want to handle it? Present that something back to the user, just take the newest, throw yours away, overwrite with yours, however, right? And it'll just keep, and then you do it again, and then if something else came in, it would get called again, and it'll just keep calling this thing until you don't have any more conflicts. Right? But that would be kind of confusing to show. It's even probably confusing to explain, but I think as you use it, you'll see. But in any event, that's how you'd want to update existing things, and this is this thing that will get called recursively to handle conflicts if you need to. Right? Again, you could also do it with that and just roll how you're going to do that completely yourself as well. Deleting is trivial. Just a simple one-line call. You get the document by the ID. Once you get the reference to the document, just delete. Done. Obviously, if you're updating later, that's another place you could get a conflict. And then the last piece I got in here is the attachments business. So, what I'm doing it's just a platform detail that I'm using. I got that OpenGL thing, and I'm drawing in that. At the end of the day, it's an image, right? So I drew a thing and I got an image out of it. And I'm taking that image and I'm just saving it as an attachment, kind of like I'm giving it the type, right, that it's image JPEG. So anything that would support attachments, just like if you were setting attachments on email through an API, right, it's going to feel like that, do it through an API. Right? And you give it some key to address what the attachments is, the uncreative JPEG data that I called it here. But you just to do it, all you got to do is call this set attachment on the revision and save. And by the way, once you get the document back to work with attachments, you have to go through the revision API. So just how they do it. So document current revision, create revision. Right? Now you've created an unsaved revision. Set your attachment data on that. Save back the revision. Right? This is how you can handle it. They have their own exception class. This is how you can handle things got saved if something went wrong. Okay, I've never seen anything go wrong. I just wanted to put it in there to show you there's the exception. So obviously you want to handle it, and you can, of course, do that exception handling on all those other ones above that are sorely lacking any of that. Right? And just console write line because I'm against demo. Now reading attachment data is similar. Right? I get a document again. Everything you do, just simple API one-liner based on an ID to get the document, right? The Couchbase document. Likewise, or like the saving of an attachment, adding an attachment, pulling an attachment out, goes through the revision API again. Right? Only this time, instead of create revision, I'm going to call on the revisions get attachment. That is the method you'd call, and I'll pass it in the thing that I just hard-coded in here for demonstration purpose that I knew is the data that I want to get out. Right? Might be, if that's the only thing you're saving, that actually might be appropriate too. Of course, maybe put it in the top of the class or something like that. So once I get the attachment back, do a little check to see if it's there. Then I can use them in shared code. I can use normal .NET Business to read that guy out. Okay, and I guess you could use the new, I got the old older null things here. You could use the new null checking thing, the question mark dot thing. That's in C#6 these days too. Probably should change it to that. So that's reading an attachment. Really simple, right? So go through the revision API, off the document. Once you have the revision, either create a revision, either set the attachment or get the attachment. Done by the key. And then when you get the attachment, you can just read it out with normal, normal .NET Business memory stream. How I did it there. So, and then you get that memory stream, you throw that baby back as bytes, and you can use it in your platform to present it and turn that into a UI image in iOS, for example, bitmap in Android, for example, and plop that into the image view to render the image out, or however you want to do it. Pretty cool. And lastly, what I'm doing here, and the thing that that's all about, if I didn't have any of the things showing up from when I did it on iOS and it saved it over almost immediately to the Android side, if I didn't have any of the syncing business, everything I've shown you now would still give you the saving of files, saving of data, querying of data, and you can see I'm not writing any SQL anywhere. I cheated a little bit by using the query that was out of the box, create all documents one, but you saw I could just create a view and run the set map guy to just emit an index, and I could have just done create query off of that, and so it's not like that's a big deal. So I'm saved from having a, it's document-based data, so there's not really a lot of SQL-like logic, SQL-ish SQL type of stuff you might be working on anyway. Most part you're going to be pulling out stuff by the key, and you want the value, and you might want to filter out the values, and you can filter out the index, and it's kind of a clean way to do that. You're not joining, or if you're getting into a scenario where this data depends on this other data and there's some cardinality between them, it's like, well, you probably want relational data at that point. This isn't really what you're doing, or what you should be using there. But in a lot of cases, that might be very valuable, I think, over just going straight to SQLite. But introduce the syncing part now, and what they would call, I throw around the word sync. The API calls it replication. That's probably the proper terminology to use. You create these replications. I'm going to jump ahead. The method on the bottom is just this little thing to create a URI, right? I'll just show you here what I have running in a little virtual machine here. I've got this I did it in Linux. Didn't have to. This could have been Windows. There was no rhyme or reason. I just doing both just to show you different ways to do it. So I've got this is the sync gateway. So I installed the sync gateway, I configured it, I'll show you what that entails, and I'm running it in here. And I just got the IP address. This is like a welcome running in a virtual machine here. And that's what I just hard-coded in here. And I gave it the name of the database that I created. And when I did that create database, the sync gateway is going to push it up, from Couchbase Lite. The API is going to push it up into the sync gateway, and then subsequently the sync gateway is going to push that Couchbase Lite database into either sync it to an existing one or create it up in Couchbase Lite, Couchbase on a server. Now I'm using the in-memory one. I'll show you that in a minute when we jump over back to the Linux thing. But here I'm just creating a URI to get at my sync gateway instance that I'm running there, and to tell it the name of the database that I'm using, because you use that when you're in the URI that you create. So a little URI creation function that I use up in here when I go start replications. And they have two different types of replications. Pull replication, obvious, getting stuff down, and push to get stuff up. And they have a way that you can do it so that you can just say sync when I tell you discreetly, or I can say start replication, always be syncing. Go wild, sync, if you're trying to maybe do a chat or stock or really responsive. So that's the way I did it here, because I'm just trying to make it simple. I'm trying to get that so it showed up on the other side, on the Android side immediately. And I start either replication. I can start them independently because they're independent replication objects. And when something's changed on the replication, I just this is just my little hack that I just revoked this refresher delegate, which is just this crude way that I updated my my native code. I just did it through a .NET delegate so that I could invoke the change. You could do that through a platform-specific thing with like a notification center or any kind of other little notification type thing. You could do it through like a MVVM thing, like a messaging type thing. Like Stuart's got the MVVM cross thing has support for cross-platform messaging, or you could do it through just a regular old interface. However, so that's nothing that's just me doing that. The bigger part is they've got this event so that you know when the replication's changed. All right, now, let's see over here. Got a few minutes left, so good. I'm going to show you one last thing, and then we can jump into have a few minutes for questions. I want to go back over to the Linux piece here. Where is it? There it is. So I'm running that guy there. So there's this, just so you tell you, it's up in Couchbase's docs pretty well. They've got this config.json file. Remember, their APIs work underneath the covers, they're RESTful APIs, and they use JSON to move things up and down. In this config.json file, there's a lot you can do here, but this is how you configure what the sync gateway is doing. In this case, you'll see I have, I'm sorry it's a little small, I have the database that it's going to use. So this is the database it's going to use up to Couchbase, the server, right, of the same name. Where the server is, I'm using Walrus, which is the in-memory one, and this sync function. And the sync function, there's a lot of things you can do in the sync function, like, this user can't do this. That's actually syncing. You can identify all kinds of filtering logic. You can do a lot of things in here. The minimum thing you do is you just you give it this, what I did here. You can even just copy and paste it. You just want to get it running to sync. You have a function that sync that takes the document in, and then it just tells it what channel it's going to go to. And I won't explain what that is. There's a lot to that topic. It's more involved with how Couchbase works. Then they have this part down here where you can control security in a non-programmatic way, which I just wanted to, if I wanted to disable certain channels again. The channel is a way you can it is a way you can describe what certain rights, what things can be done based on how a person's, or an instance rather, has connected to it. What I've done here is open up the universe, and I've just given it guest access, just to get it working and have it all locally. Now, what's cool is I could then go and I could develop this whole thing, develop it all locally, set up my sync gateway, just do this little simple trivial thing for development with Walrus, see that the syncing all works, get the client all happy, and do all that development. And later, at the same time even, a person with a lot of Couchbase server expertise could be, or an existing Couchbase server installation could come in and they could adapt this and connect it to the real Couchbase server after. Nothing changes on your client code. Couchbase Lite code's the Couchbase Lite code, and all the syncing logic will work exactly the same. It's just, you have more going on the server part and how this kind of level of indirection before it actually can talk to the Couchbase server itself. Think almost like, a front end that you might put in some ways if you're doing a web service on top of a relational database that's in the back end. In some ways, right? Now, I'm not going to show here because we don't have time. I've got an Azure one that I'd set up, and I just, I didn't do too much. I also left guest on it, but I just changed the server just to show it could work. I don't have time to do it today, and I set up a full Couchbase server in Azure, and then what you would do is you'd see I could delete all the clients, and then I have all the data in Couchbase server from the previous runs, and then I turn it all on, and boom, all the data comes back down from the Azure installation, and it's still pretty snappy. And I'm running that one in Windows Server. The newer one, the one that looks like the crazy the one with the 2012 one. So, but pretty easy to get Couchbase set up. Could have done all of this with Linux, all of this with Windows, however you want to do things. Right? Couchbase part stays the same. So that's the last part of it that I wanted to show you, just to tell you about the gateway. No, not going to go into Couchbase Server today. That's a whole talk on and of itself, and a lot to know about if you were going to production, about what you would do in this little file here. I just wanted to show you it at least so you can see, kind of have a jumping on point for learning about other things you could do in the gateway, right? And around how it interacts with Couchbase Server. Great. That said, my bright yellow. There's my blog, gratuitous self-promotion. MikeBluestein.com. Sorry, I haven't been blogging. I've been pretty busy this summer, but I'm going to get to blogging again here coming up in the fall. Next couple things are actually going to be the 1 or 2 Couchbase posts. I'm going to do that thing with live query that I had been working on anyway, and I'm going to do some peer-to-peer thing. We'll see if it's 2 posts or 1 or whatever. So keep an eye on that. Give you maybe a reason to look at my blog and my all the interesting stuff I may have up there. There's some good stuff up there actually. And on Twitter, if you want to see me ramble even more than I am today, I'm pretty funny. So you can follow me though seriously on Twitter. It's actually a good way to get a hold of me. If you want to follow me, I'll follow you back. I get a lot of email and I try to answer, but sometimes it's hard to address everyone. Whereas Twitter tends to be good because it keeps everything short. So it's a good way to ping me if you didn't have a question about anything. I try to get back to people, be helpful, be a good community guy. So that's that. And my email is mike.bluestein@thinkaheadsoftware.com.